Hi, welcome to Dig Into China. I'm Dong Shong. Thank you for tuning in. Your support means the world and plays a crucial role in the YouTube algorithm. Liking, sharing, and subscribing not only show your support, but also help YouTube recommend my videos to a broader audience. Thank you very much. Today, I have some major news to share with you. Last Wednesday, the Wall Street Journal published an article titled, "U.S. Takes Aim at the Chinese Banks Aiding Russia War Effort." This article was swiftly reposted by Chinese financial media outlets. It appears that even without the prior approval of the Chinese propaganda department, the financial community in China sees this as a significant development. The article reads, "The U.S. is drafting sanctions that threatens to cut some Chinese banks off from the global financial system, arming Washington's top envoy with diplomatic leverage that officials hope will stop Beijing's commercial support of Russia's military production." But as Secretary of State Antony Blinken heads to Beijing on Tuesday, the question is whether even the threat of the U.S. using one of its most potent tools of financial coercion can put a dent in complex and burgeoning trade between Beijing and Moscow that has allowed the Kremlin to rebuild a military badly mauled by more than 2 years of fighting in Ukraine. China has heeded Western warnings not to send arms to Russia since the beginning of the war. But since Blinken's trip to Beijing last year, China's export of commercial goods that also have military uses have surged, with China now the primary supplier of circuitry, aircraft parts, machines, and machine tools. U.S. officials said Beijing's aid has allowed Moscow to rebuild its military industrial capacity. The West now worries Russia could win against Ukraine in a war of attrition, particularly if allies don't mobilize their own industries to match Russian production. Blinken and other top cabinet officials have been sounding the alarm among Western allies, including last week at a meeting of the Group of 7 industrialized nations in Capri, Italy. But this time, as he heads to China, officials are counting on the threat of Chinese banks losing access to the dollar and the risk of roiling trade ties with Europe persuading Beijing to change tack. The banks serve as key intermediaries for the commercial exports to Russia, handling payments and providing client companies credit for trade transactions. China can't have it both ways, Blinken said in Capri. It can't purport to want to have positive, friendly relations with countries in Europe and at the same time be fueling the biggest threat to European security since the end of the Cold War. The article from the Wall Street Journal uncovers a significant shift in the strategic approach of the U.S. government. Before we delve into analyzing this news, let's also discuss another report from Xinhua News Agency regarding Blinken's visit to China. It's intriguing to observe specific topics that Xinhua is highlighting. According to Xinhua News Agency, China has outlined 5 main objectives for Blinken's visit, emphasizing a firm stance and clear demands on issues such as Taiwan's economic ties and the situation in the South China Sea. So, what are China's plans and expectations for Blinken's visit this time? Xinhua News Agency emphasizes the vital importance of establishing a correct understanding as the primary concern in Sino-US relations. This is the first button that needs to be fastened. Are China and the US partners or adversaries? It's a fundamental question. It's noteworthy that this time the US is taking concrete action to punish China, and yet Chinese government is still merely talking about fastening the first button without taking tangible steps forward. Secondly, there is a call for intensified dialogue, a reference is still made to the old San Francisco meeting between Biden and Xi, and there is a push to establish or revive more than 20 institutional mechanisms for ongoing consultations. Strengthening communication channels is imperative. Thirdly, it's crucial to effectively manage differences, especially by respecting China's red lines regarding issues like Taiwan's democratic progress and human rights. This time, there is an insistence on outlining new red lines for the United States. Regardless of the past effectiveness of such measures, the focus is on establishing fresh boundaries now. Fourthly, it's imperative to voice objections against the escalated economic, trade, and technological suppression measures imposed by the United States on China. Fifthly, there is a mutual obligation to shoulder the responsibilities of being major powers. Here are my takeaways. Firstly, Blinken's visit to China carries a very clear mandate, much like Yellen's visit before, which was aimed at urging China to curb the international spread of excess capacity. Ahead of Blinken's visit, the Chinese Communist Party's attitude remained consistent. On one hand, there was excessive enthusiasm, while on the other, there was extreme belittlement of the other party. They depicted Yellen as a glutton, claiming her visit was a plea for help from the Chinese Communist Party. However, upon Yellen's return, she announced increased tariffs, with steel tariffs set to triple. Blinken's recent visit to China had a clear and primary objective to halt the Chinese Communist Party's support for Russian military-industrial enterprises. Even before Blinken returned to the United States, the Wall Street Journal had already leaked behind-the-scenes information last week. Similar to Yellen's visit to China, Blinken utilized the diplomatic channels for communication while simultaneously wielding a big stick. In essence, he followed the Chinese saying of offering courtesy before wielding the sword. Blinken informed the CCP of preparations to take action while simultaneously making arrangements for measures like cutting off Chinese banks from the SWIFT system. However, if you observe the response from the Chinese Communist Party, it seems like they are completely oblivious to this. They are still discussing the first button and drawing red lines, reminiscent of their lack of concern regarding Yellen's previous visit. However, when action is imminent, the CCP starts to panic. This time is no different. The CCP's diplomatic approach appears ineffective as they fail to grasp the significance of Blinken's visit. Blinken isn't just here to persuade. If persuasion doesn't work, he's prepared to take action. Therefore, in the game between China and the United States, the US demonstrates rationality, employing systematic and well-planned actions, while China's response appears more emotional. Take, for instance, when Yellen discussed the excess capacity with China. Rather than engaging in meaningful dialogue, China impulsively denied the issue. Consequently, the White House imposed tariffs, leaving China with little room for maneuver. Similarly, with Blinken's visit, if China fails to respond earnestly and continues to emphasize trivial matters, once Blinken returns to the US, banking sanctions will be swiftly implemented. So, when we look at these two pieces of news, it seems like the Chinese Communist Party isn't taking things seriously. It appears that officials in the foreign ministry and those under Xi Jinping, including figures like Cai Qi and Li Chang, aren't fully engaged. This is quite a peculiar phenomenon. Furthermore, the deterioration of relations between the United States and China began during Trump's presidency, marked by the onset of the trade war in 2018. As tensions escalated from the trade domain to encompass various sectors, including politics, measures such as the expulsion of Confucius Institute's restrictions on sensitive academic disciplines from China, and the closure of some Chinese consulates were implemented. Despite the escalation in hostilities, there is one area where the United States has refrained from taking action: the financial sector. Many experts, particularly in finance, have urged the US government to target the Chinese Communist Party in this arena, citing the vulnerability of China's financial system and the potential impact of US intervention. However, for reasons unknown, neither the Trump nor the Biden administration has been inclined to confront the CCP on financial matters. Instead, they have even assisted the CCP in stabilizing the exchange rate of the yuan to maintain its normal operation. However, this time presents a significant twist, as the United States plans to impose severe punishment on China's banking system by removing them from the international SWIFT network. This punishment is incredibly harsh, akin to the sanctions imposed on Russia for its aggression in Ukraine, and perhaps even more severe. As of now, neither the United States nor Europe has fully expelled Russia from the SWIFT system. Only certain banks have been sanctioned. It's noteworthy that China hasn't committed any major wrongdoings yet, but it stands to enjoy the same treatment as Russia. Financial sanctions don't greatly affect Russia, which relies heavily on oil exports with weak international economic ties. In contrast, China's reliance on the international market for everything from energy to food makes it vulnerable. Its entire existence is based on international trade. If the United States were to target China's financial system, severing its ties with the global financial network, China would suffer significantly more than Russia currently does. Even in the absence of directives from Xinhua News Agency and without the conditions of a Xinhua News Agency press release, Chinese financial media outlets were quick to report the explosive content from the Wall Street Journal. Even Security Times, a subsidiary of People's Daily, covered the story. China still has astute individuals who are highly attuned to such matters. They grasp the magnitude of the situation. However, the state media persists in its upbeat tone, emphasizing the importance of the first button and drawing red lines against the United States. While the highest levels of the Chinese Communist Party may seem nonsensical, those in the financial and economic sectors have already sensed this significant threat. Though financial sanctions may not severely impact Russia, if imposed on China, the CCP would be severely incapacitated. From the perspective provided by the Wall Street Journal's report, it's clear that the dynamic between China and Russia isn't as straightforward as previously assumed. With constant covert exchanges or unwavering support from China to Russia, according to U.S. intelligence, China's backing of Russian military industry began in mid-last year and significantly intensified after July. Before this period, China exercised some restraint, but there was a notable escalation in support during the latter half of the year. This recent revelation has prompted both Europe and the United States to address the issue. Initially, I didn't fully grasp the situation and assumed China's support for Russia was within expectations given past behaviors. However, Western countries are deliberately seizing upon this development as a pretext for future actions and laying the groundwork. The Wall Street Journal's report indicates that the West isn't suddenly bringing up this issue. It's a response to China's increasing boldness and aggression since the later half of last year, which has angered the United States. Therefore, the United States' current stance is not merely a rhetorical warning. They have already begun formulating sanctions measures. This is typical of the United States. Once they decide to act, they proceed systematically, and it's challenging to dissuade them. In the later half of the last year, Russia found itself in a very precarious situation, with Ukraine launching a major counteroffensive and internal unrest brewing, including the rebellion of Wagner Group. Yet, at this critical juncture, Xi Jinping increased assistance to Russia. Understanding this context helps explain why the United States is so incensed by the situation. Xi Jinping came to Putin's aid when Russia was most vulnerable, which is why the United States is so furious about this issue. Therefore, through the Wall Street Journal's report, we can also understand why the West suddenly attaches so much importance to this matter. Fourthly, once the United States sets this precedent, it's challenging to halt the momentum. Throughout the past few years of worsening relations between the US and China, the US has exercised restraint, refraining from directly targeting China's financial sector or deploying its full array of financial weapons against it. Any actions taken were merely warnings. However, now that action is on the horizon, it carries significant weight. It signals that the US government no longer sees attacking China's financial system as off limits. Before direct military conflict, finance was the last frontier, and now it's evident that the United States has removed this final barrier. This development is much more serious than vague discussions of decoupling or risk mitigation. Therefore, what strikes me most about the Wall Street Journal's report is that the disagreements and confrontations between China and the United States are undergoing a qualitative change. It's no longer adequate to merely describe the relationship as deteriorating. It has reached a stage of qualitative transformation, which warrants the attention of everyone. Thank you for watching. Please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly. Until then, be well.